What's going on, football fans? It's me back again, just sitting in my bedroom, chilling, thinking that about something that Arthur Blank said, this past week or so, probably about a week and a half ago now. He gave an interview to Vaughn McClure, and in that interview, he alluded to the fact that it was pretty much, playoffs were expected of this team. And on this Sunday, without, Falcons football to watch, it really got me to thinking about, is playoff or bust, is that a fair gauge for this team? Now, obviously, Arthur Blank can do what he wants to as far as whatever expectations. A lot of people expected Dan Quinn and Thomas Dimitroff to be gone this offseason. So the fact that they're back again is probably further than what most people thought was going to happen anyway. So it's within Arthur Blank's right and his power, so to speak, to set whatever expectation that he has. Now, I think that expectation comes off of the turnaround that they had in the second half, to go 6-2 and end up, 7-9 for the second straight season. That was a analytic turnaround that Rich McKay said that they had never seen in the history, well, maybe not necessarily in the history of football, but something that they had not seen in quite a long time, that type of a turnaround, okay? So with that being said, it really got me to thinking, should we be expecting the playoffs next season for the Atlanta Falcons? Now, me myself, I'm always expecting my team to be in contention. I'm always expecting my team to compete. That to me as a fan is one of the few things that you can actually ask for, is for your team to compete on a regular basis, right? Like once you get into the playoffs, that's like a whole nother ball game. Okay, so with that being said, you got to be able to get into the playoffs for that to happen, for you to be able to start that second season of the year, so to speak. So when Arthur Blank made that comment, it really had me curious to what would it take for this team to reach the playoffs in 2020. And I myself think it's a pretty simple answer. The defense has to play consistently. I think that this offense is going to play consistent enough. I'm not expecting the 2016 offense, and if you are, I'm sorry. That's just not going to happen. A, you're not going to have Kyle Shanahan running through the door to call plays again, and B, that was just a culmination of a perfect storm. I mean, Shanahan's offense that just took him to the Super Bowl was really led by the defense. I mean, they had some games, but, just like it was on display yet again, the offense couldn't seal the deal, right? So what is needed from this team is a consistent defense. That's where I'm at. That's the metric that I'm looking for, right? Is can Dan Quinn, can Raheem Morris get the consistent play that is needed? Now, we still got the draft and we still got free agency coming up. So the makeup of this team is still yet to be laid bare. But with letting guys and already announcing that you're letting guys like Vic Beasley walk out the door, however you feel about Beasley, he still did lead the team in sacks. And a lot of those sacks came from in the second half of the season. So by letting Beasley walk out the door, you're letting production, like quarterback hitting production, leave. Okay? You got Takk McKinley, who is getting his shoulder repaired yet again. And, for the second time in his career. So we're not exactly sure how he's going to bounce back. And is he going to live up to his first round billing? Now, we have, for the past few years, have been lambasting Vic Beasley for not necessarily giving us the production. So now it'll be interesting to see if the fan base, turns on Takk McKinley, so to speak. Now, it is way more than just sacks. So don't sit here and try to think that all I'm talking about is sacks, because somebody hit us up on Twitter earlier today asking about, how many sacks did I think it would uh, be considered a success for Tack McKinley? And I'm going to go ahead and call it. If he's active in the backfield, 5 to 7 sacks is, I'm happy with. If he's also getting batted down passes and tackles for loss and things of that nature, if he is just generally affecting the game, then I'll be happy with Tack McKinley. Whether it's, 10 sacks or 7 sacks or what have you. But if he's just getting stood up at the line of scrimmage and not affecting, the play and not affecting the game, then we're going to start to have a different conversation. So ultimately, I think to get back into the playoffs, it's going to land squarely on the shoulders of Raheem Morris and the defensive staff. If Dan Quinn is taking more of a CEO type role this coming up year, that's what it sounds like, that he is planning on doing, more of a Mike Smith-esque role, then it's really going to be on Raheem Morris and Joe Witt Jr. and all those other defensive coaches, Jeff Ulbrich, to really continue this resurgence that we saw in the second half. That's what changed. It wasn't necessarily the offense changing. It was the defense getting stops, getting timely turnovers, getting timely sacks, getting timely pick sixes in the Tampa Bay game. I mean, that is what was affecting the game. That is what was changing the game. I mean, by sticking with Dirk Cutter on the offensive side, my expectations aren't very high for the offense, and they won't be until they show me different. Now, I expect the offense to be consistent. Now, I'm not expecting them to be explosive, and I'm not expecting them to be overwhelming. I'm expecting them to be more consistent, which I believe Dirk Cutter with Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley, and whoever's running the rock can potentially produce. I mean, you started to see that once the offensive line settled up, and started to gel a little bit when Chris Lindstrom came back. So now you're going to have Lindstrom and McGarry in their second year, a potential solidification of the left guard, whether it be Carpenter, if they spend a draft pick, or even coming and getting another free agent. There's that guy out of the Patriots, Joe Thuney, I think is his name, that has he's the high regarded offensive lineman, I guess you could say, that is scheduled to hit free agency. So it'll be interesting to see what they do at left guard. But if they can solidify that line and give the running backs, whoever it is, a chance to get going, then I think the offense will be fine. Now, when I say fine, I'm not talking about prolific, okay? I'm not talking about, like I said, 2016. I'm not talking about world beating. I'm talking about 21 to 28 points on a consistent level. Now, if you give me an above average defense, I think that will go hand in hand. And I believe that could be a recipe to get us back into the playoffs. But the question really remains is, if we don't make it back to the playoffs for the third straight year, do we then axe Dan Quinn and Thomas Dimitroff? Do we admit that that was a mistake? And why me? When I say we, I'm not talking about the fans. I'm talking about Arthur Blank, Rich McKay, the guys making those decisions. They're leaning on the fact of the turnaround of the second half, and some of y'all have noted and said, "Oh well, you played the Panthers twice." You're right. You played the Panthers and Kyle Allen twice, but you also beat Tampa Bay at home, and you also went on the road and beat New Orleans and San Francisco in their buildings. So if you're going to give me Kyle Allen and the Panthers, you can't discount the Saints at their home and San Francisco in their home. So the defensive turnaround in the second half was real, okay? So if we can keep that going, then I think, yeah, we do have a good chance of being in the playoffs. Now, it'll be interesting to see who else they decide to let walk whether it be Devondre Campbell, whether it be Alan Bailey on the defensive side. What do they do with an oft-injured Desmond Trufant? Do we cut him, let him walk, and rely on Joe Witt Jr. and these young defensive backs? Okay, what does it look like when Keanu Neal comes back? You know, I really liked what we saw with DeMonte Casey and Ricardo Allen in the backfield, man, in the safety positions. So what do you do with Keanu Neal when he comes back? Do you maybe not rush him back so quick this time around since it's the second year in a row? Maybe you let him rehab some more, you know? I don't know. Maybe you bring him in as a dime linebacker type deal. Play more big nickel with 3 safeties instead of 3 corners. You know, maybe you let Ricardo Allen and KZ roam and put Keanu Neal closer to the line. These are all things that you could potentially do. But as far as do I think that we could get back to the playoffs, I always think we can. Until this team shows me that we can't, I think that we could always get back to the playoffs, and that is the mark that me as a fan, I'm always setting forth, is the playoffs or bust, you know? So I'd be interested to see what y'all think it takes to get back to the playoffs or what this team needs to do, whether it's just, upgrading at running back or getting that, defensive piece via the draft or free agency. We've heard a lot of rumors floating around. Do you think potentially letting Austin Hooper walk, do you think that's going to hamper us from being able to get back to the playoffs? Me, myself, I don't necessarily think so. I think if you let Hooper walk, you just, distribute his targets, so to speak. Because I just don't, with a team that has Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley, I think whoever the third option is going to be able to eat. Whether it be a tight end coming over the middle or somebody like a Russell Gage or even a back catching it out of the backfield on screen passes. I think all those are viable options. But we'll see. We'll see what happens, and we'll see if we miss out on the playoffs for a third year, if that will be a nail in the coffin for Quinn and Dimitroff. I think it would be, myself. I think if we start out slow, that could be Dan Quinn gone then, but that's just my opinion. All right, folks, as always, you can catch me on Twitter at Grim1128. That's GRIMM1128 on Twitter. If you'll catch us on this coming Tuesday, we'll have another live stream. I believe we're going to try to have a guest on, so that'll be interesting. Be a draft guy. Some of y'all may follow him on Twitter. I don't want to spoil it too much, but come check out. Hopefully he'll be able to make it on with us Tuesday and answer y'all's draft questions. But as always, Falcons fans, rise up.